Fan of the show? Never miss an episode by subscribing to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or at our website, cinemapsychoshow.com. Be sure to like us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram at Psycho Show.
I had an acting coach years ago named Stanley Zareff, who is out of the New York area, and he was all about getting to kind of the core intention of the character and kind of blending that with the core intentions of the actor. You know, it had a lot to do, your approach with a scene had a lot to do with how are you feeling today? What do you want out of life? And how does that kind of mesh with what your character also wants? How's it different? How do you work out that difference? So I hope I'm at a stage in my career where I do those things without thinking about those things. I think it's just like practicing an instrument. When you start out, you spend a lot of time just kind of learning, the fingering on a guitar or whatever. At a certain point, you move beyond thinking about how you're doing it, and your brain just does it. Sort of moves from sort of front of brain to, back of brain. And so I don't know if that's helpful to any aspiring actors out there, but that's how I kind of shape it up.
Oh, goody, goody, here it comes.
Welcome to the Cinema Psycho Show.
You are interested in the unknown, the mysterious, the unexplainable. That is why you are here.
Oh, my God, don't stop now!
With your hosts, Brian, John, and Elaine.
Welcome to the Cinema Psycho Show, the madhouse for film freaks and film fans of all types. I'm your host, Brian Connington, and I'm not joined by my co-host, John Woolscroft, currently today. It's just me. But don't worry, folks, because we've got an interview that John's done. We're in episode 209, and oh boy, this one is a doozy. It's not every day that we get a interview with someone who has, I would say, one of the largest IMDb listings that I've ever seen. Like, I literally went through this person's IMDb listing before recording this, and I'm just like, man, I didn't realize that Jason Douglas was quite literally in almost everything, because the man is. That's who we're going to be interviewing today. So John has a really fantastic interview with actor and voice actor, and I would say multifaceted, to the point of ridiculous proportions. Jason Douglas, you might not know that name, but you probably have seen him, and you've probably heard his voice, because the man is in everything. He is known as the American voice of Lord Beerus on Dragonball Z Super, and a number of other Dragon Ball Z spin-offs. He is also the character Tobin on The Walking Dead. He is actually Satan in the show Preacher. So the man is all over the place, and we had the fortune to be able to sit down with him and have a really nice conversation about how he got into acting, how he got into voice acting, how, acting for the camera and acting for voice is a little bit different, and some stories from behind the scenes of some of his work on shows like The Walking Dead, and as well as some of his more upcoming roles in Cyst. So without any further ado, we're going to throw it over to John with an interview with Jason Douglas.
Do you like the solar system?
Yeah, it's quite cool, planets and stuff.
All right, well, I'm here with Jason Douglas, and as I start all of these things right off the top here with everyone I speak with, first question, can you tell us about yourself?
Oh, hey, first of all, John, thanks for having me on your show, and it's always fun to talk to people about my career. Yeah, I'm a Texas-based actor. I work really all over the country. Your fans or listeners may know me from The Walking Dead. I was on The Walking Dead for 4 seasons as a character named Tobin, one of the Alexandrian cohort on the show. And I also did several episodes of Preacher, also on AMC, as Satan. Let's see, fans of anime and voiceover type, characters might know me as Krieg the Psycho from Borderlands 2 and 3, or of course Beerus the Destroyer from the Dragonball franchise and video games. But yeah, I've been acting for about 20 years, actually longer than that. I've been married for 20 years. I've been acting longer than that, so at least a quarter of a century. So yeah, I started out on stage. I primarily considered myself an aspiring stage actor for most of my 20s, and then I just kind of gravitated toward film and television. I would say at some point in the late 90s. I ended up getting cast in a movie called Secondhand Lions, directed by Tim McCanlies and starring Robert Duvall, Michael Caine, Haley Joel Osment, and that was kind of a transformational experience for me, and just kind of everything about that film and my experience on it felt sort of defining. Like, there's the magic of cinema happened on that kind of sweet little movie. And so yeah, it kind of, I would say it kind of pulled me out of my stage aspirations, alongside the fact that I was eventually was a married guy with kids, and a career in the theater is very difficult on families. So yeah, that's a little bit. It's funny. I could talk about my career and my experiences from a lot of different angles, but maybe that's a start.
No, yeah, that's fantastic. Now, how did you get into acting? Because I always find that so fascinating. Like, was it always a life goal for you to be an actor, or did you just kind of find it in college, or what got you into acting?
Yeah, it's really interesting you asked that, because as a kid growing up, I was a misfit for sure. I didn't really fit into any specific kinds of social groups. I was a bit of an oddball, and in fact, I had always had an interest in kind of, I guess you could say, movies and television and performing arts, but I kind of suppressed that. But as a kid, I had like a tape recorder. I used to like make radio shows. Like, I used to make up stories, and we called them, "Hey, let's make a movie," but it was really just cassette tapes, on a Radio Shack tape recorder. And but in high school, I tried sports. I tried, doing all the things that I saw other kids doing, and it really wasn't until my senior year that I took an acting. It was actually the second acting class. It was like a theater arts class. Like the second. I had taken one as a freshman and been in a play. And then my senior year in high school, I played Oberon in our school's production of A Midsummer Night's Dream. And I was enchanted by the language. I was inspired by the other actors who were phenomenal. I mean, I went to a high school that was at the time well known for a really high quality theater program. And if any of your listeners know who Jim Parsons is, I mean, who doesn't? But he was in my class. I mean, he was in that show. I was in that show with him, and he was brilliant, of course. But at that time, I was a pretty young and inexperienced performer, but for some reason, I just kind of knew that's what I wanted to pursue, and I didn't have other sort of major competing aspirations. So I went to the University of Houston the following fall, and as a theater major. So that's how it started.
And yeah, I noticed, looking up, your CV, so to speak. Obviously, as you mentioned at the top, a lot of voice acting work, and I find that so fascinating. Can you speak to voiceover work as compared to like on-screen acting? Like, how does that compare? How does that differ?
Yeah, it feels like sometimes it feels like two completely different kinds of things, because oddly enough, even though you're sort of working on a microphone, which normally on a movie set, a microphone, the microphone enables you to really play it quietly. I mean, you can practically whisper and be picked up. But in a recording booth, typically the kinds of projects that you're doing, and it's particularly in reference to video games and anime, they do require kind of a theatrical performance. So it's an interesting conundrum, because on the one hand, you're in a booth, you're speaking into a microphone that could pick up just a whisper, but you're giving a performance that's really designed to kind of break free of the constraints of the medium, particularly with regard to video games. And so it is different. I mean, I certainly approach it. I feel different when I'm recording a video game versus or anime versus being on set. On set, I know there's a camera on me. My entire body has to be in the moment of the scene. Whereas in a recording booth, it's very different. I can show up looking pretty much whatever I want to look like. I can dress comfortably. I certainly don't have to go sit in hair and makeup for a half an hour before I get to set. I mean, it's just, you park your car, you walk in, and then within 10 to 15 minutes, you're performing. So it is very different. I think what we do as actors is we try to modify our performances depending on the medium. If I were doing a stage play, I would be projecting to the last row of the audience. So, modifying the performance for the size of the room. But with film and television, it's different because, think about it. When you watch film and television, you're using a lot of close-ups, a lot of medium shots, and it's as if for the audience member, for the person in the audience, it's as if you're kind of standing in a close circle with those actors having a conversation. And so if you were having a intimate conversation in a busy restaurant, how would you do that? And so that's kind of the difference. But that conversation just wouldn't work on stage, and it may not be sufficient for the kinds of work that we're doing for anime and video games. So in that regard, those are the technical reasons that it's different. That there are many ways that actors like to say, "Oh, it's just the same. It's acting," and there's a sense of like, what's the rhythm of the scene? What's the intention of the character? There's kind of scene study acting work that can apply to all the mediums, but it's definitely a technical adjustment.
Well, speaking of modifying, is there any difference between video game voiceover work as compared to film and television? Is that a different type of situation, or is it all 6 and 1/2 dozen?
Right. You mean like video games for voiceover for video games versus voiceover for television?
Yeah, like Borderlands is compared to like Dragonball Z.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sure. I would say that it depends on the genre and the type of show. I mean, I did one recently, an anime called After the Rain, that I really like, and it was very cinematic. You want it to feel as natural as possible, and yet within the genre or the medium of anime, there are often things that are done sort of visually that are over the top. The character might react in a really hammy, kind of over the top way, and we accept that in anime. We wouldn't really accept that if we saw that in a live action movie, we would say, man, that actor was really hamming it up, or he's really chewing the scenery. But when it comes to anime, it's very different. It's a different set of expectations that the fans have, and that the animators are trying to convey, because they're often coming from a manga source, which, if you've ever read a manga, they're painting in broad strokes, right? And so that often ports right into the anime. And so characters that are just kind of might in one moment be having a perfectly natural kind of dialogue with another character can suddenly get into this kind of, freak out mode that again would seem cringy or garish if you were watching watching the same scene play out in a live action version, which is a reason why I think it's very difficult to translate an anime property into a live action, is because so much of what we enjoy and love about an animated property is contained within the element. When you try to do it live action, it just doesn't work. So,
yeah, just kind of shifting gears a little bit here. One of my favorite shows in the past 10 years, or I should say just in general, is The Walking Dead. So, what was it like, getting a role on a show like that? And considering how quickly people die in the show, did you feel that I shouldn't get too comfortable necessarily?
Yeah, well, I never thought that character would last beyond maybe a handful of episodes. I mean, honestly, and I knew going in, I knew just enough about the show and the character from the comic book that, he's in and out within a few, within a few issues. So at the time it felt like a huge big deal. I mean, and I think for any actor to get a recurring role on a major show, like at the time, one of the biggest shows in the world, it's an honor. First of all, you're going to be working. There's a bit of sigh of relief as an actor. Like, okay, I can settle into being a working actor for a little while without having to, the anxiety of the grind of auditioning and not getting cast and kind of trying to, pull together, revenue sources from voiceover here and whatever there. I mean, it's for any actor who is pursuing acting as a career and who's, and who has to pay the bills that way, getting cast on a show like that can feel like, man, I can just, I can breathe for a while. And you're elated, right? You're elated that you get to go and work on a big title like that. So all of those were all emotions that I felt. And then of course getting to work on the show. It's a show. I mean, it's essentially in the horror genre, you're surrounded by craftspeople of different, you talk about all the effects and makeup effects and practical effects, along with, obviously the writing and the guys that do the cinematography and it's terrific. And so it was a fun experience for me, but here I am on the other side of it. And what's next? So,
and for those listening to this who haven't been lucky enough to be in the same room as Jason, like you're a big guy. You're what, 6'3"? Is that?
Yep, right about there. 6'4", 6'3".
Yeah,
yes.
Good. Very broad shoulder. When you got the Walking Dead situation, I don't know if they told you immediately exactly what your character's going to be. Did you think that you were going to have more of a intimidating role, so to speak, because you are like a taller, broader shouldered kind of guy?
Well, I'm definitely aware of my size and kind of how it can impact my casting and I do believe, and I'm saying this without bitterness, but I do have to face the reality that a lot of times my height could be a deal breaker. And I'll never know. I might turn in what I feel like is a fantastic audition and one that should, by all rights, put me in contention, and then don't hear anything, or I hear that, I'm pinned, or I got close, or maybe it's down to between me and one or two other actors, and I can't help but wonder sometimes if my height doesn't affect, and I kind of feel that it does. But I could never prove that. The bottom line is that when you're on set and you're the tallest guy on set, they have to adjust camera for that. And if your co-stars are all 5'10" and you're a good 6 inches taller, the camera doesn't like that very much. The frame of the camera doesn't like that. So adjustments have to be made. And if they're not made, it can look awkward. If you look at some of the scenes in The Walking Dead where other characters are talking to me, sometimes it looks like they're looking up, at something flying overhead, right? And they're just looking up to make eye contact, which is what we normally do when we talk to each other. We tend to look at each other in the eyes from time to time and then look away. so that can be a problem. I did a show a few years ago called The Lost Room with Kevin. What's his name from The Usual Suspects? Sorry, I'm blanking. Right? No. Kevin. The problem is it's a Kevin name. I know a lot of Kevins. Kevin
Pollock, right?
Kevin Pollock, right? Yeah, he's a fantastic actor, truly. I mean, and he's known as a comedian. He's a terrific dramatic actor. He's also not as tall as me, significantly not as tall as me, and for some of our scenes, we had a few scenes together, and they would put him on an apple box, and what they call an apple box, and he was very gracious about it, and I just remember thinking, like, this would be a problem for some people, back when Walker Texas Ranger was still a thing, with Chuck Norris, of course, and it was shooting here in Texas, but the word was out that you probably didn't need to audition if you were over 6 feet tall, and that was primarily because Chuck Norris himself is only about 5'10" or so, and they really didn't want anybody on the show that he had to look up at. So, needless to say, I didn't do any episodes of Walker Texas Ranger. So,
and is Andrew Lincoln as intense as people say with his method acting?
Yeah, I don't know. He is intense in the scene. But he's a sweetheart of a guy. I mean, he is a great. I will say this: when Andy is on set, everything seems like it's going to be okay. Like he really leads by example, and he sets a great example. And I don't know if that comes from kind of his, British sort of stage background, but he's a really quiet, gracious guy between takes, but when it's time for action, he kind of moves into a zone, and he has certain ways of ramping himself up. There are certain kind of theatrical methods for kind of, ramping up your energy, and he avails himself of those things, and he's unafraid to do it. So I would say, if anything, it's the kind of intensity that as an actor you go, oh, cool. I sort of have permission to do that. It sort of, I think it's, in a certain sense, it says, it also says to everyone else who's in the scene, it's time, right? It's kind of like the huddle, before you break, and then, you're playing football and you huddle, kind of call the play. There's a certain amount of, okay, now we're ready. Let's go, and on The Walking Dead, you really need that kind of energy because it can be punishing, particularly in the hot summer months, and you're outdoors all day long, and it's just take after take after take of running or fighting or, all that. That takes a lot of energy out of a person. So.
And obviously, for The Walking Dead, there's the great palate cleanser at the end of the show that is Talking Dead.
Yeah.
What was that?
Right.
What was that like? Sitting on the couch, for
yeah.
that.
I would say I was a bit nervous for that. I mean, at that point I had done a few podcasts, and I had done those kinds of things, interviews for like this one, and I had done. I think I'd been on some panels, like I want to say at maybe some. Conventions, like pop culture conventions. So that gets you closer. But knowing that I was going to be sitting on the couch, and I had asked them, I said, who else? I thought maybe I'll be a guy that they just bring on the show later, and I'll chat for 10 minutes and then it'll be done. And they were like, no, it's just going to be, you and my colleague from the show. You guys are going to have the whole hour. And I was like, wow. I had always thought, like, what if I get to a place in my career where, like, I go on the Tonight Show or something. At some point, actors think about that, and you think, well, I got to be funny, I got to be interesting, I got to have something cool to say, and I don't know, I don't think of myself naturally as a comedian, so I was nervous about going on, but it was cool. The producer, what they do is they call you about a week or two before just to plan the show, and they kind of interview you, not unlike this, but you talk specifically about the show and about the episode, and so you kind of feed off each other and get ideas for what to talk about. So in the show, Talking Dead, it feels very loose and unscripted, and though it's not specifically scripted, you do have a sense of the kinds of things that you will end up talking about. So that's very helpful. And then to go and sit down on that couch. It was also a great honor, and I knew it was the last time that I would probably get a chance to do that. Because obviously that was the night that my last episode was on, and I died. And they were. I just felt like. It felt like a real honor to me to be able to sit on that couch. I thought it was a great respect, a gesture toward me and toward the character. So it was very cool. I mean, I took my wife and I thought it went well.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of piggybacking off that, you've done a lot of AMC shows, Breaking Bad, Walking Dead, Preacher. Was that just kind of a coincidence, or did you have success on one AMC project and that kind of opened the door for others? Or
total coincidence, really. I of course I'll never know the details of how I ended up playing Satan because I auditioned for it, and I had heard, and I won't say names, but I had heard of other actors with much bigger, celebrity status and name recognition than me who had also auditioned for that role. I had just come off of The Walking Dead. I think when I auditioned for it, my last episode aired within a very short period of time than that, from when the audition came up. And so, I don't know. Breaking Bad was a totally different situation. That show isn't owned by AMC. It's made by Sony. Sony Pictures Television makes that show. And so that's a Sony property. I shot that in Albuquerque. A couple of years ago, I did a guest star spot on a show called Night Shift. It's kind of a medical, unexpected hit. It was a midsummer pickup that usually those things only last a few episodes. This thing turned out to be a big hit for a while. And that was also made by Sony and shot in the same studios where Breaking Bad was shot and where Better Call Saul is shot, and had some of the same production team. So I thought, well, that's interesting. But of course, Night Shift is not on AMC. I think Night Shift was an NBC show. So, I would like to think that there's somebody at AMC that's like really pulling for me, because they have some great programming. I, of course, would love to go do another show on that network. But I think it's more just, that I kind of got lucky with a couple of shows.
Gotcha. And what is your preparation like as an actor? There's the classic sense, there's the method sense. Like, how do you get into a role?
Right. I am not fundamentally a method guy. I've studied that stuff, and I think it can be useful as a tool. Some actors definitely were trained that way and commit to it that way. My training was a little more, here's a bit of this, here's a bit of that, do what works for you. And so therefore, that kind of affects how I approach acting in general. I think my big bring, if you will, is just that I'm really interested in the script. Like, I'm really interested in the words, how those words are chosen. I'm really interested in sort of deciphering the intent of the writer. And so I kind of come from a dramaturgical standpoint, kind of an outside in on one level. And then I have a different level, which is just that gut instinct, just like what happens organically when you say these words, what's going on in the scene, what does the character want, What do I want? And so hopefully there's a meeting in the middle between kind of what I would do organically, what I would do in that situation, but also kind of like bringing in like what I think I understand about what's the tone of the scene that's intended by the writer. Is this comedy? Is this a tight thriller? Is this melodrama? Right, whatever it happens to be. So I don't know if you would call that a holistic approach to acting. It's really nothing super fancy. It's just kind of how I approach it. I mean, I have great respect for the masters, the acting teachers like Uta Hagen and different ones. Larry Moss is so well known on the West Coast, and there's been books written by him and about his method. I had an acting coach years ago named Stanley Zareff, who is out of the New York area. And he was all about getting to kind of the core intention of the character and kind of blending that with the core intentions of the actor. It had a lot to do, your approach with a scene had a lot to do with how are you feeling today? What do you want out of life? And how does that kind of mesh with what your character also wants? How's it different? How do you work out that difference? So I hope I'm at a stage in my career where I do those things without thinking about those things. I think it's just like practicing an instrument. When you start out, you spend a lot of time just kind of learning, the fingering on a guitar or whatever. At a certain point, you move beyond thinking about how you're doing it, and your brain just does it. Sort of moves from sort of front of brain to, back of brain. And so I don't know if that's helpful to any aspiring actors out there, but that's how I kind of shape it up.
Gotcha. And any desire to be on the other side of the lens, so to speak?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I've always had kind of these, I don't know, backdoor aspirations about, what it would be like to direct or write. I think I used to write a little bit when I was kind of, a kid and up in, into college, and I kind of set that aside, and I regret that. I think I would like to be a little bit. I don't need to be in front of the camera all the time to have, I think, to be creatively fulfilled. I've had opportunities over the years to direct scenes or direct little things for people and enjoyed it very much. And in particularly in Texas, where I'm at right now, I feel like there's a need for more folks on the producing side. Got people that are able to put together projects and connect writers and filmmakers and people with money and to create projects. I feel like that's a niche that still needs to be filled. So I've been spending a lot of time just kind of thinking and reading about that role, and I'm on. I don't know if you're familiar with the new Clubhouse app, but I spend a lot of time in that app, kind of listening to producers and filmmakers. Talking about how they get it done. And so that's pretty fascinating to me.
And, and not many people have the luxury to play Satan in their lives. So what was that like?
Yeah, that was crazy. I thought it was a fun opportunity to be a character, like something completely different from me and my personality, a way of really kind of dipping into, I think, my theatrical background, but also a chance to go and do creature effects, because the entire Satan as he appears is a grossly modified version of me. First of all, I'm not that jacked, like the Satan mold that they built is if I would probably weigh 200 pounds heavier than I do now, or at least 100. I mean, that was amazing. And then the face, they basically did a mold of my body, including my entire head. And if you can imagine just a cast of my face as it is, and then they began adding, sculptors actually took clay and they added features. So it's really an enhanced, if you will, or an aged and kind of more grotesque looking version of me. And then that became the Satan face, which had to be applied. It wasn't just something that was easy. They had to apply that with glue and everything. So it was a really a really an exceptionally well done, I thought, craft that I just kind of let happen. Right, I had to go for the molding, the body casting, and for the fittings. But there were a lot of craftspeople that were involved in creating that character, and then I just had to kind of fill it. And what's strange is that, as big as that character could be, like kind of the choice we made was to kind of play it as very sort of salesman-y, very almost opposite of what you see, which I think is fun to kind of, not to take a character like that we kind of expect to be this kind of sinister, oppressive figure, and just take it in a different direction. So hopefully it worked.
Well, speaking of unique working environments, you were in the movie Sin City, and what is that like acting with, basically you're just on a giant green screen, know, and everything's coming in after the fact. Like what is that like as an actor coming up?
Yeah. I mean, it's a bit like, it's a bit like going to rehearse a play, but you don't have the set built, and you still have to get quality work done. You still have to kind of develop the beats and develop the scene with your scene partner. And luckily I had one of the most unique and interesting scene partners I could have drawn in Mickey Rourke. And so he was very much, he sort of drove the rhythm of that scene, and it really didn't matter that we didn't have an entire, of course we did have Katie's bar. That was a practical set. So any of those scenes that you see were entirely practical. But the scene in the alley outside of the bar there was virtually nothing there. I think in the shot you can see like the steps that come out of Katie's bar, and that's real. And then everything else was created in post. But Mick was he was super intense. So you asked me if Andy is intense. Mickey Rourke is intense. And I think wherever he and I had played that scene, it would have had that intensity because it required it, right, by the text, but he was also bringing it. So yeah, fun stuff. It was fascinating because that was pretty early in my screen career. It was only the second or third film I think I'd ever done, and loved working with Robert Rodriguez. Robert was still this, hot up and coming director. Sin City really is what pushed him out there in a really big way, and it was exciting to be on a set like that.
Well, and I wouldn't be doing my due diligence here if I didn't plug a little bit from Narrative Films, because I met you on the set of Cyst.
Right.
And so, yeah, I just wanted to talk briefly about that. And when I got the screener copy of it, you command attention in the film. I remember watching, thinking like every time that you were on screen, I was drawn to your presence there. What was it like shooting that that film in general?
Yeah. When I think of Cyst, I think about how much fun I had shooting it. It really felt like a classic sort of indie horror film experience where everybody's, it was a really tight set. I think everybody was there bringing their A game, but it was this ridiculous movie about a giant cyst monster, right? So, but there's a place for that in filmmaking, that kind of classic horror, and in the sense of it being just ridiculous. It felt like something out of the '60s, the giant tomato monster, or these movies about nuclear accidents gone wrong, and so it had that kind of charm, and it was so great working with Ava Haberman, who is just, if she were here in America more long term, I think she would definitely find her place. I love her work. I love her and her passion for whatever projects she's working on. And then of course George Hardy. He brings such a positive energy, and I think part of it is because he really comes from he's kind of an outsider coming in. And I think that's the approach he brings, is just that, I'm just grateful to be here. He has a totally different career. He doesn't need to be an actor, but he does it for the love of it. And that's so refreshing. So that was my second project with Tyler Russell. I think when I got the call and I got the script, I was like, I don't know about this, like what? And, but at the end of the day, it was a great experience. And yeah, I love independent film. I love the weird vibe that, and you never know what you're going to get with independent film, and I think the positive reaction that we've had to the film is, it's just, it's icing. It would have been a great experience regardless, but it's really nice that some of the reviewers are kind of seeing it for what it is, which is just kind of a fun homage to the old creature features.
Yeah, and the other film being obviously Texas Cotton, which you
Right.
were fantastic in as well. So kind of stole the show there, so to speak. Jason, I can't thank you enough for coming on and agreeing to doing this and just talking about the beautiful craft that is acting. And that was really fascinating stuff, and I can't thank you enough.
Thanks, John. It was fun. Let's do it again sometime.
Sounds good.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, buddy.
Thank you again to Jason Douglas for taking the time to talk to us today. Be sure to check him out in the new movie Cyst, which should hopefully be coming out soon, as well as the multitude of projects that he is involved in. Again, if you just take a look at the man's IMDb page, you're going to see that he is literally in a bunch of things, be it voiceover work or actually on-camera acting. So with that said, be sure to check out our Patreon at patreon.com/Psycho Show if you want to help contribute to this show. Be sure to like us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Psycho Show. You can also find us on the Epicast Network at epicastnetwork.com. If you have a favorite movie or question you want to throw away, you can contact us at cinemapsychoshow.com. And be sure to subscribe to us and follow us wherever you listen to audio, and we will see you next time.
Epicast.